Welcome to the Republic of Westralia, the richest place on earth. Everyone is building their own McMansion. This is the bit Mark McGowan really doesn't want you to know about.
How many budgets have you covered?
I reckon about 20. Haven't seen one like this though. It is the richest budget in the history of Western Australia. This guy has got fat stacks. No Premier has ever had this much money. Mark McGowan today has 40 billion. I don't think any government anywhere in Australia has had this much money.
They'd be green with envy.
Not green with envy, wild with anger. And they're not my words, they're Mark McGowan's. No period in the history of this state comes close to what we're experiencing now. Not the wheat and sheep boom of the 50s and the 60s, not the four-on-the-floor entrepreneurs of the 80s, not even the original China boom which defined Barnett's premiership. Every chart in today's budget was off the chart. Have a look at the building approvals in WA compared to New South Wales and Victoria. Everyone is building their own McMansion. In the middle of a global pandemic, every measure of economic health in this state is going up.
And lots of surpluses, something like 15 billion over the next 5 years.
I don't want to rain on everyone's parade here, but the thing about budget surpluses is they're all We're high-fiving each other when we've got money left over after paying the household bills, but we're forgetting about the mortgage payment. When the WA government reports its surplus, they leave out the cost of building all the hospitals and the schools and the police stations.
So that means the surplus isn't as big as what we think it is.
Not even close. They don't deliberately try to hide the state of the books. In fact, McGowan was actually very frank about it today. He stressed that the leftover money is a bit of a mirage. Let's look at this year's $5.6 billion surplus. That's the figure you'll see everywhere for the next few days. Once you factor in the cost of Metronet and the new Children and Mums Hospital and a new desal plant, which we never knew we need to have, but it's coming to a beach near you soon. Once you factor in all that, the $5.6 billion surplus is down to 2.6. Our next surplus isn't going to be 2.8 billion, it's 1.7 billion. A year later, in 2023, the $2 billion surplus is actually a $2.1 billion deficit.
Ugh, right.
That's okay. We're miles ahead of where we used to be. In Mark McGowan's first budget as a government MP when he was a whippersnapper back in 2001, things were grim. Back then, Eric Ripper and Jeff Gallop were cutting expenses to the bone so they could clock a surplus and prove that the ALP could be trusted with the books after the disaster of WA Inc. They stopped spending completely. They looked under every cushion in every ashtray for spare change, but they were still not in the black. In the end, they raided Western Power for $20 million to get them over the line. They called it an emergency dividend. Today, McGowan is spending like Jay-Z. He's got pay rises going out. He's got discount public transport, free security systems for seniors, more cops, more nurses. And the piggy bank is still pretty full.
So he's proved to be a pretty good treasurer.
He's proved to be a pretty lucky treasurer. We're in this fortuitous position because of two completely unrelated events over which he had absolutely no control. One was a dam at a Brazilian iron ore mine bursting, the other was someone getting sick in Wuhan. Those two things meant governments around the world freaked out about a recession and started spending on infrastructure to pump prime their economies. This happened at the exact time that the iron ore supply went through the floor. Iron ore royalties worth $11 billion alone in the last year came to Mark McGowan, $39 billion since he won office in 2017. That's more than double what Colin Barnett earned in his last term of office. This budget was delivered by Mark McGowan, but it was powered by the People's Republic of China. He said so himself, and he was pointing at this chart as he said it. $400 billion worth of exports from Australia, 60% coming from WA, and the lion's share was iron ore going to China, where they turned it into steel that went into apartment towers and hospitals and railways and tanks.
So are we going to pay down that mountain of debt?
Well, you'd think so, right? But no. This is the bit Mark McGowan really doesn't want you to know about. Debt is going up. Let's have a look at Table 2 on page 4 of Budget Paper number 3, a page-turner if ever there was one. McGowan makes the point that debt was scheduled to be much higher than it is, and that's true. Having $30 billion on the visa is better than $40 billion, but it's still $35 billion. And $25 billion was enough for Ben Wyatt to get all Chicken Little back in the day when Barnett was Premier. Remember the debt monster? They based their entire election campaign around the mountain of debt. But we're still better than the next guy. Have a look at Victoria and New South Wales. But that's a bit like feeling good that your house is only half on fire when your neighbour's has burnt to the ground completely.
So who do we owe all this money to?
Australian banks hold a lot of our debt, but 20 to 25% is held by foreign governments. About 60% of that go to countries in North Asia, and a lot of that is Singapore and Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is part of... Welcome to the Republic of Westralia, the richest place on earth. Enjoy it while it lasts, because it never does.
God, you're grumpy.
You do 20 budgets. I'm Ben Harvey. For more Up Late, click the subscribe button below.